welcome to Sends and Suffers podcast. I am your host, Mario Stanley. Let's get into it. Today on the show, we have Tiffany Hensley. Tiffany and I actually really got plugged in on a trip to Mexico. I was going to go climbing. Partner had a situation, didn't show up. So I connected with her a few months prior on Facebook with an organization that she's partnered up with called Escalante Fronteras, which basically means climbing borders. I'm going to let her get into telling you why that program is so awesome. But this conversation is really just two good friends catching up and really hearing about what she is doing and how she is trying to make the world a better place. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear this conversation. There is a lot of knowledge dropped. So there's going to be pretty dense show notes. So feel free to dive in and do some homework. I'll see you guys on the other side.
The whole point of Sends and Suffers, honestly, is I want to have conversations with my friends because I think I have awesome friends like you.
You've got a lot of friends, Mario. Yeah, you know everybody.
I wouldn't say I know everybody. I think I've just been around long enough to as I like to call the kids say I'm old for a climbing coach because I am the oldest climbing coach that works for us at Summit.
You don't act like it.
Good.
You've got that youthful enthusiasm. You're like, oh my God, let's go do this thing. And I'm like, he's somewhere in his 20s, maybe. And I'm like,
oh my gosh,
I don't know.
But I call myself a stegosaurus with the kids, and the kids are just like, oh, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. The stegosaurus was like T-Rex was way, 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 way after me. Like way, way after me. I'm like a true dinosaur. And, but. In all reality, rock climbing is a young man's game if you're going to play at the real high end of it. I'm not saying I'm that old, but, I think I've been around for long enough and for myself. So that's what I would say. But
Well, one side of the discipline is a young man or woman's game, right? Like bouldering is what we think of now these days as rock climbing, but really there's this whole evolution, this whole spectrum from bouldering to sport to trad to multi-pitch to alpine and then mixed, right? And then you can't put a young individual on a big mountain because they just don't have the mental fortitude experience. So I mean,
that's true. I mean, unless that's what they were gunning from the very beginning, but
right, I think they're raised that way. Yeah, I had a friend, one of my biggest mentors, actually. He started off being brought up the Grand Capucin in the Alps, and then later on became a really hard 14B sport climber, in his mid 20s, back when that was the hardest grade, and did the absolute opposite. But he's also young at heart. He's somebody who's just like you, super high energy, and it doesn't really matter what he does. But I think it's very much in the mind until it comes to bouldering. Yeah, bouldering is a young person's sport.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, also, let's just be honest. That's why bouldering does really well at nationals or events. It's a showy sport. I mean, it's I always call if you remember climbing here at Dallas, at the Dallas location, I always call that the Peacock Gym. It's where everyone goes to strut their feathers because there's so many boulder problems, and it's an arena, and that's really what that gym was built for. But train at all the other gyms, but you go to Summit Dallas, that's where the peacocks are. They're out there having fun. The boys are strutting their feathers, wearing lacy little tank tops. That's it.
I mean, that's how I was raised, in one of those kind of in that atmosphere, I guess. So we started, right? Should I introduce myself?
Oh yeah, we're just going ham in this. Okay, yeah. So Tiffany, tell the world who you are. I guess how we know each other.
Yeah, this was a great segue because I came across that whole spectrum. So I'm Tiffany Hensley. I started climbing when I was 7. My mom asked me if you want to do something really good in your life, you should start now. And I was like, that's the weirdest question in the world, but I would totally be a rock climber. And then strangely enough, that's all I've done since then. So I've been climbing for over 20 years. I started off in a climbing gym, and was definitely kind of like a peacock. It was like you go to the gym and you don't go outside very much, or like I didn't, and you would just see the other climbers and be like, "Ooh, wow, he's like that person is a really good climber," and really showy. And then you'd want to emulate that, copy them, or like do your own thing. And then I evolved over the past 20 years to go more into sport climbing. I was very competitive, and I was kind of like defined by that. That was my identity, was as like a peacock or like a greyhound that just like competes and doesn't do anything else.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that, because when I moved to Colorado, I made a lot of new friends, and some knew me from the competition scene. But when I started off, like since I was 7 years old until I moved and I was 18, I would be in the bouldering gym or the climbing gym like all day. Like if I wasn't in school or if I wasn't reading a book, I was in the climbing gym every single day with a pair of climbing shoes on. I never even took them off, which is probably why I have bunions. And and I have terrible bunions, and climbers make fun of me for that. But
climber's toe is a thing. Like, I think if you've been climbing long enough, like you just have to admit that you're going to have some fugly toes just a little bit. Like it's the way it's going to go. I think the gains are well worth the sacrifice.
I think so. Yeah, and the body it adapts surprisingly. I mean, I was wearing those shoes that you had to pull really hard for like 5 minutes to get the climbing shoe on. And that's not good for your feet, to be wearing that, walking around and climbing like all day as like a growing, developing child whose growth plates are still forming.
I mean, binding of the feet has kind of been around for quite a while. I mean, at least it's like rubber, it's stretchy, you get to take it off, and then, they're not like breaking your toes and putting it in, a small little, wooden shoe. I mean, it's been around. So
yeah, it's it goes back, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really feel that much pain in my feet, so I guess that's okay. And the body just adapts. Yeah, as a kid.
So you're a competition climber and now meeting new people in Colorado?
Yeah, so I should probably briefly go over that 10 years span of competing, because that was like, that defined me so much. When I went to Colorado, I met these people I competed with, including like briefly like Emily Harrington, Alex Puccio, and Paige Clausen. Sasha DeJulian, although she wasn't living there, but there's like the scene and you bump into people. But I had competed with them in like the World Cup in Vail. I don't remember if you ever went to the Vail Games, but there was always the IFSC Bouldering World Cup, and it was like the only one in the US. And we loved competing in it because the Europeans didn't want to pay the money to fly all the way over to the US and compete. They had all their own world circuit. And so like all the Americans would show up and like do pretty well and be all proud of ourselves. And then like if anybody from Europe came over and competed, we'd just get completely smashed. But that didn't happen until like after I kind of stopped competing. So like 2008, it was my first World Cup, and it was like when I started getting more sponsored by like Prana and different companies, and I did fourth, and I was like, wow, like this can't really get any better. Like this is amazing. I was like training super hard for it. My whole life was just about climbing and training and being the best. Like I grew up in the gym where Chris Sharma started, and he'd be in all the time, and he would like know people's name and say hi to me, and I'd be like, oh my God, like I want to be the strongest climber ever. And so then when I would train my whole year, like in school doing push-ups behind the counter in chem class, and then go to like the World Cup and compete, and then go through that cycle of like always training for the next competition. And then I went to the North American Continental Championships, and by some stroke of luck, I won against Emily Harrington and Paige Clausen, who are like, without a doubt, better climbers than I am. but I was training very unsustainably, like making all the classic mistakes, not eating enough and not being very balanced. So that was like my peak. And that got me invited to the World Games. And that was like a really big shift for me because that was like the peak of my competition career. And getting to go to the World Games, which is like a little sister of the Olympics, and then getting to see what like the best in the world looked like Patchy Usubiaga and like Sean McCall, I think was there, and some of the best climbers. But that was also when I left high school. Like I basically graduated, went to that event, came back to the US, and I was like, I just didn't really care that much about competitions. I was like, I have just competed so hard, spent my whole life doing that. Now I want to see what the real world looks like. And like, you know, go to do the college experience, move to Boulder, be on my own, you know, like I've been super sheltered, like a greyhound or like a peacock, like I said. And then I go to Boulder and thinking like, this is the place where Dave Graham is like bouldering at Cats, and like all these climbers have come out, like Christian Griffith and Alex Puccio was living there. And I was just so focused by like this idea of being part of the climbing scene and learning more. Even though I still had my head stuck in the climbing gym and I was still a peacock. And I just, like, it opened my world. As soon as I got to Colorado, I remember walking into the spot bouldering gym and seeing Alex Puccio, like, with her tank top, just super ripped. Like, the first thing I see walking through the door is her finishing this, like, super hard boulder problem and mantling on this, like Fontainebleau slab looking thing that looks super hard. And I was like, oh my God, I have arrived to the land of giants. You know, like I came from this town that was like, there's a very small circle and not of people climbing and not many women. And when I competed, I was always like the best in my category, like go to nationals and be like pretty good. But then when I came to Boulder, it was like, bam, like I wasn't good compared to everybody else. And there's so much to learn from. So it kind of like, I don't know, it was like super competitive, and I became less so. I would like still compete, but then I would kind of not take it too seriously and was kind of more interested in the outdoors. And I would just show up at a competition and get on the US team and be like, how did I get here? Like I'm next to Angie Payne. Like Angie Payne is this amazing female climber. She's one of the first women.
Yeah, I religiously watch her on YouTube. Like she's, you know, I say this like and if she's ever listens to this podcast, with all due respect, like you were a woman amongst giant women. But you know, when you first look at her, I'm like, oh, she doesn't look like she's this ultimate crazy crusher. And you watch her climb and you're like, holy shit. And that's like totally like the thing that happened with most men, I think, in general, looking at women climbing back then. Because this is like, I started watching her stuff years ago when she first started putting it up. And now this is not the case. Like now it's totally different. Like, you know, I expect a lot of women to be crushers just because, you know, it's just so common nowadays. It's the way, and I think that's the way it needs to be. But, you know, she is very impressive to watch rock climb. It's definitely a treat.
Yes. And moving into the subject of women, I did want to mention and like preface this that I've been trying to follow the transgender, non-binary, LGBTQ to A+ kind of progressive movement. And I do want to say, when I say her, she, his, him, those are people who have established their gender. And I associate myself as her, she. And I'm just learning this. So if I make any social gaffes or if I'm not being inclusive in my language, I just want to say, sorry, I'm learning. I had this really interesting experience. Have you heard of, do you know of Maricela Rosales?
I know the name.
Okay. Like when I'm talking during this podcast, I'm going to try to name drop as much as possible, like with
Yeah,
these
cool.
people
I
who
mean,
are.
educate the audience. Yeah. I mean, like,
Yeah.
educate me
Sorry.
and the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, these people are just so much a part of like who I am. Like what I focus on is like trying to be an advocate for social justice, specifically for at-risk youth. But I mean, it shouldn't be limited. And I've also tried to like, as just a regular climber, kind of dirtbag, whatever, just try to like integrate that into my daily life. So Maricela Rosales actually like if you know that I should explain. I have done a lot of work in Mexico, and I'll get to that. But I was really interested in like the Spanish-speaking side of the climbing community and bringing resources that exist in the U.S. for Spanish speakers to places like Mexico and Spanish-speaking countries like Latin America. So I met Maricela through Merit Climbing when I was working with them as a team manager, and she was one of our athletes ambassadors. And she's this amazing individual. She's currently a kind of advocate and figure for Latino Outdoors, which is an amazing organization.
Yeah, I've heard of them before. They're that is awesome. Actually, no, I do know who. Never mind. I do know who you were talking about. I've met her at OR when OR was happening. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, she's hard to miss. She's really loud and really funny, and really like has an amazing personality. And I think she's definitely spoken in quite a few events as well. I've bumped into her all over the place. She was a part of Shift. I don't know if you've heard.
Yep, I am.
Shift,
I know those guys.
Yeah, Adventure for Conservation or something like that, or Conservation Through Adventure, which promotes emerging leaders in shifting the paradigm of the outdoor industry to be more progressive. Look that up. It's super cool. And so when I met her, she was like talking about her history and talking so passionately that I could tell that she was really digging. She digs deep. And so she just recently had an article come out talking about Latino outdoors in her own, more specifically her own history, but also being very sensitive to her language. And when she writes Latino Outdoors, now there's an X in Latino. I think that comes from like Kendry, what's his name? Kendry Ibram. How to Be Anti-Racist, that author. Also a great book.
Oh, yeah. I have not read that book.
Oh my gosh. This is what I recommend. Go to like Google Books and just read the preview. Just read the free sample. Because I know everybody's like trying to absorb things in little chunks these days, and they don't want to jump into buying the book. But I read a little bit of that when I had a brief conversation with her recently, and I was like, okay, I'm starting to get this. I think if everybody in the community just read the opening part that's free on Google Books or wherever, then it would give them a really good start to understanding like how our language is progressing to be more inclusive and more sensitive. So Maricela, actually, she's been a huge influence on me because of the way that she uses her own story and her personality to kind of be able to speak on these about social justice, about gender roles and gender inclusivity or non-binary people. I just had to name drop her. If you wanted to follow her, I can't remember her handle, but
I'll look it up and put it in the show notes. So we'll make sure everybody has it.
Yes, she is super cool. We've collaborated a couple of times because she's fluent in Spanish.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and what did we translate? We translated this. This is like what I do. We like get on these collaborations with small projects for Spanish-speaking youth and climbers in the U.S. and in the Americas. And her and I, we worked on this translation of The Pact, which I don't know if you remember the Black Diamond and Axis Fund collaboration where they brought those athletes out to do cleanups at the climbing area.
I do. It was, what was that, about a year or two ago?
Couple of years ago. Yeah. They had like Hazel Finlay and Alex Honnell, Joey Kinder. It's got to be like 3 years ago.
Okay.
So she and I, we translated this the whole pact, all the graphics and everything, and Access Fund was super amazing, and they did the graphics with the translation. And then I got that, and I passed on to Access Pan Am, which is the name dropping again. This is the sister organization to Access Fund that exists for all of Latin America, which is kind of a big area. And they're an amazing organization. They have very few people for what they do, but they work with directors in different countries. And if you're a rock climber traveling to anywhere in Latin America and you're interested in community work in the climbing area, in development, in building bathrooms, getting shit done, just go to their website and check out the programs that they're doing, the projects. They've got it in English, Spanish, and Portuguese because it's based in Brazil, but they work in like Chile and Peru and Argentina. And if any climber wants to have like a sustainable trip where they're like minimizing their footprint and getting involved in the community, and bringing down bolts, then that's a great place to start and be like, oh, if I wanted to go to Torres del Paine, they're building bathrooms, and I can pitch in some money so that when I'm, I don't know what I can say on the podcast, but
you can say whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I'm shitting in literally on Torres del Paine, I am also helping that project that's helping to keep it clean and having and doing good shit, and it feels good to do that, and that's my whole thing. That's what I love to do, to go down to these places and really get involved. So we did this collaboration. We got these graphics. We shared them with Access Pan Am, and then I also printed them out and locally was doing it in Mexico where I was living for several years, and was going around to all the gyms and putting up these graphics. The pact is a campaign about promising to take care of our climbing area, to have sustainable access, to use leave no trace ethics, and that kind of standard or campaign. We don't have the resources to do that in places like Mexico and a lot of other places in Latin America. And so something like that, Access Fund could just, grind it out, make the graphics, and we found a good translator, and then we throw it out to Access Pan Am and all these different networks, and then they've got something to work with. It's one more tool for them to be more sustainable in their community, because these communities don't have that many resources. So that was super cool. And I can talk more. I can talk more about Mexico. I can
actually, real quick. Since I think you kind of hinted towards it, I don't think people know that you're fluent Spanish speaking. So I don't know if there's a little shout out or a message you want to give if anybody is Latino listening to this. So you can kind of just go for it. Go just have at it.
They'd have to be bilingual because they'd have to get through 10, 15 minutes of this.
Just something short. Just say hello.
Yeah, to the kids in Escuela de Fronteras that I worked with and still work with, I can tell them that they are awesome and they inspire me, and that I'm really excited to bring them to the U.S. I'll just say that now. Hola, chicos de Escuela de Fronteras. No manches, estoy en este podcast y espero que están escuchando. Si no, les voy a mandar para que tienen que escuchar. Y me encanta conocer ustedes, me inspiran. Y espero que vienen a los Estados Unidos pronto. Y nos vemos pronto en México. Yeah, thank you. They're going to be so psyched to hear that. Be
That's awesome.
You're on so I don't know. Do you want to start with questions, or should I just jump into it?
I do. I want to let you run with it, because I think it's also really important for people to kind of know what you're doing and everything. But I do want to back up to something that you said actually earlier when you were talking about your tenure and climbing stretch. And I think this is something that's important that I think will relate to, climbers just in general. But you said you were on top of the world when you took 4th place. And I think sometimes, and this is just coming from a coaching perspective, kind of talking about climbing again, that people get so wrapped up in ascend and so wrapped up in trying to get to the top of everything, that I think what they forget to embrace is the suffer, the training, everything that you're going for it, and getting to where you're getting. And so, that's just something that just stood out for me that you said. And I don't think people really, I don't think people enjoy where they are. And you just said that you did. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so I think you're right, Mario, that my headspace where I was at was kind of like you said, I wasn't really enjoying where I was for the most part, and then I'd feel like I'm on top of the world briefly. But then I would actually, I'll be honest, I would go into a depression after these big events because everything I'd worked for was over. I had to start again. I didn't see the friends that I saw like once or twice a year because I would just train on my own or be reading a book, but otherwise I wouldn't see them. And then I would also like put my body through the grinder at that time, and I wasn't eating well. So then afterwards, in the recovery phase, I should have been eating a lot more, moving around, but I didn't do a lot of cardio and didn't eat enough. So I ended up kind of emotionally spiraling downwards after like a nationals or World Cup in like March or May. And those would be like, this is about highs and lows. I was emotionally very high and then very low throughout that entire time.
Do you think that it changed your relationship with climbing throughout the years, and especially when you finally got out of the competition circuit on your own, like, you know, building up to a big project? Did you notice like mentally? Because I mean, if that was your, you know, habits or patterns for the, you know, better part of 10 years, has that stuck with you? And is that something that you found to be a strength or a weakness?
Good question. I think what was a strength from that was learning to work super hard towards a big goal and not depending on like somebody else to kind of help me get there, and just knowing that it's possible. But I think it was overall very harmful in the long run that my mentality was that I could do things alone, and I did not enjoy the process with others and learn as much from others. So my mistakes just kept reoccurring. My emotional lows just kept happening over and over until it was just normal. And like what I do now differently and what I realized is that I definitely got burned out on the competition scene because my worth was attached to how well I did. And I got to a point where I was getting injured, and that meant I was a terrible climber, which wasn't true. But I mean, I could have worked with a trainer. I could have shared information with my fellow climbers, but I would be embarrassed to talk about my injury because that's like a sign of weakness. Or they would just tell me to stop climbing, and that's not what I wanted to do. So overall, I've changed a lot more to where I kind of dip into that experience when I want to train hard on my own. And I know that I need to if I want to achieve some of my goals. But I have definitely changed overall, where I try to go to those people I know that have more experience than me and look at them as mentors and as coaches and as friends and say, like, hey, I had this injury, this tweak, this thing, you know, like right as it's happening, so that I can learn from that and not repeat my mistakes. But also, like, I didn't talk about my mental and spiritual side. Like, there's a couple of great podcasts by climbing psychologists who talk about, like, the 4 legs of the table. You've got, like, strength training, mental training, and then there's, like, a psychological and spiritual side to it. I'm not sure if I got those right. But basically, if you don't have all 4 of those, you're not a very stable or consistent athlete. And I was training strength so much without talking to anybody about the psychological side of like, am I imagining success? You know, that's like classic sports psychology. Or am I just throwing myself into this training and not like thinking about how to keep my spirits up and listen to my body and know it feels right to me in a more wholesome way. I feel like I can't be more specific because I'm
no. I
thinking
mean,
about that time.
that's definitely kind of like what I was very curious about. Because, like, the patterns that you set up as a kid, if you've heard of like thought maps before in your brain, like these, like your experiences through life set your patterns. Like these are going to happen. This is what it is. And when the way I understand it best is like the experiences through life allow your brain to quickly check yes, no to certain situations. It's not like I had a shitty life growing up, so I make shitty decisions. It's more of like, this is just my decision map of like when this particular situation arises, this is, all right, my brain is automatically going to check yes or no to these boxes. And then it helps you speed through the decision process. And, when you identify things like this, it's really hard to like change the way that your brain makes decisions. So you can start having a little shift in in a different outcome. So kind of segueing into another question that I have for you is, you brought up a story about Alex Puccio and you walked into the gym and you saw her and you're just like, holy shit, giants among giants. Like, you've reached the promised land. And I think a thing that's really funny is it's like, I would say around that same time, I don't know. What year was that, would you say, when you moved there?
That was 2010.
2010. Wow. Okay. A decade ago. So yeah, I would say around that time, like, I'd say for the climbing scene, that's right when like a lot of women, as you say, were like really stepping up. Women were really kind of like taking more charge of climbing and sending hard shit and doing that. They were just getting absolutely no recognition in any way, shape, or form, which is bullshit. Mm-hmm. But it was undeniable. Like at that point in time, like this is undeniable. They're sending hard. They're doing great things. They're climbing great things, and they're doing great feats. And it reminds me of like guys in Texas. And I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation in the gym where guys will be talking in a group and then they will say something about a boulder. A girl even climbs it, or they talk about it, or they'll say, don't climb like a girl or whatever. But still happens now. And I can't tell you how many times I turn around and look at guys and I'm like, like the best climber to ever come out of Texas is a woman. And they all look at me and they're like, who? And I say Alex Puccio. And the people who know who she is all look at this person and they look at me. And this person who, they're new to climbing. They probably don't know. They're Gumby, or they come in from another sport that's just, super, super male dominated. And they just have this like look. And I love it because the moment that everybody else who is actually a rock climber looks at this person and they all look, they're immediately like, oh, there is something that I do not know. And I love it. And so, how do you feel about this now? Like, I freaking love it. I think, it's great. It's like everyone needs to rock climb. I understand that like some people have, some people are like, less people in rock climbing is better. Don't grease my holds. Don't do whatever. But I'm all for this. And I just want to know, like, what has been the biggest thing that you've noticed from the perspective of a woman? I mean, outside of this, more women being into the sport.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mario. Because I've noticed a lot just because I've been climbing for so long in the past, like over the past 20 years. I've noticed a lot more female climbers. But also there's a gender gap. I mean, if we want to recognize genders, there's a gender gap in different sports, right? And it gets, as the sport progresses and there's more acknowledgement and more encouragement for women in those sports, we learn that gap closes very quickly. And there's simply, I don't know what, well, we know why, because of marketing, because the demographic is majority, consider if it's a male dominated sport, the demographic the marketing will target that, and you'll have a white male in all of the advertisements because they are doing the ice climbing and the hard this and that. But I would say that what I've noticed most of all is that the women who have set the standards aren't as widely recognized. And I think that's in part to our hesitation in taking the initiative to, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but
no, say it like it is. I mean, that's the beauty of this show. And podcast in general.
Yeah. So we don't really want to and when I say we, I just mean some women in sports, people who identify as women, they just don't want to be selling themselves as much, or there just aren't as many. And those that are out there, we feel very, I'll talk from my own experience. I have felt very intimidated across the board. And I do have that drive that's like, I want to be the first woman to do this. I want to be, I want to show the boys up, which is really, it's a really great feeling when I go in. Especially if I can like kind of represent my like people who identify as women. But so for example, if we look at the first woman to do 514, who was arguably maybe not Sasha DeJulian, but was a Spanish woman, that Spanish woman, she sent it like 20 years ago, and nobody in the US could tell you about that.
Remember, who is this? I don't even know who this is. Who is this?
Yeah, so Spanish female climber. I'm typing this in first.
Oh, I can hear it. No one cares. This is juicy. So let's give the goods.
So Jason Berekiartu Urrozola. She's, I'm pretty sure, from the eastern side and like Catalan maybe. She's known for being the first woman to climb 8C or 514B. 8C plus and 9A, which I believe that one has a slash grade like 14 CD, and 9A plus routes. So like this was, let's see, well, her birthday is close to mine. This was like back in, she was born in 72. Like 2002, she did the 14D Le Bain de Sang, the Bath of Blood, in Switzerland. Had its first ascent by Fred Nicole. It was the third 9A route in the world. And
Holy
I didn't
shit.
know about this, right? Like, stuff like that, I'm just like, why, you know? But what I understand is that, you know, if you are raised in a society that will tell you, go take the initiative, go make money, man, you know, like specifically because this is like between dudes, like go do that thing, you should, you know, be tough and good after it, then that society is encouraging that person, who are mostly men, to get those sponsorships, go give these presentations. It was boosting them up with confidence, which is something we should see as much on the side for women and people who don't identify with, who are non-binary. And we don't see that. And I did an interview with Mar Alvarez. She's also from Spain. She was the 5th woman to climb 9A. And she was a perfect example of this. She had 0 sponsors and 0. She was a firefighter. That was like her training. She built her own little home wall. And she was the 5th woman to do 9A. And she did a little video for sponsorships. And she was like, okay, maybe, you know, I want to get paid for this. But then realized, like, it doesn't pay. For women, it just, the pay is such a big difference. And the companies did not want to take her on and give her what she was asking for, which would be like a reasonable amount for her to live as an athlete. And she stuck with her career, and she stopped climbing it. She hit 9A and she's like, all right, cool. Like if I can't make money like this, I'm just going to do my own thing.
Oh my gosh. So does she still rock climb?
I'm pretty sure she does.
Oh, hopefully,
I found out about
at least
this.
for the love of rock climbing. But that's like infuriating because, I mean, if you're that good and, you know, to a certain extent, especially back then, in my opinion, like climbing brands really only gave 2 shits about you if you climbed hard. And that was it. Like climb hard grades. We can take cool pictures. I think, you know, in all reality, where they drop the ball is, and this is just outdoor brands in general. I'm not going to like pin climbing brands here. Is like, they didn't really care about people in general. I think they wanted like just climb hard. And even when she met the criteria back then, and from what I perceived it to be, they're just like, no. And I think at least now they're getting more genuine. Now they're actually wanting people who have lives, people who have stories, people actually who are just more relatable, like, you know, someone you would actually just meet. And I'm not saying she's not that person, but when you think of a pro climber, that's what you think about. They're almost like untouchable. They're like this, you know, as we said, giant. And I don't know, it's frustrating because like, okay, well, like all the boxes are checked. Oh, you're a female. So, or maybe it was not even that, I was talking to a friend about, not to kind of talk about the current climate that's going on with Black Lives Matter and racist behavior. I was talking to a friend. He was like, what about this whole thing, do you find scary, or what is the one thing that brings to mind, this whole thing is bringing to mind for you? And I told him, I was like, the one thing that stands out to me is like someone who's openly racist or openly against me. I'm cool with that because, you know where you stand. But the person who's the most scary is a prejudiced person, someone who will hide it and who's just laugh in your face where you won't let you move up, or someone who has those bias and they just don't give a shit. Hopefully if they don't know that they have those bias and they find out, they are remorseful. But I guarantee you it was probably one of those situations where it's like, oh, this letter comes in, she's a woman, no one's gonna pay attention to this, and you just throw it off. And that's probably what happened.
Totally.
And it's like, it's sad that like it's actually, you should be more mad than sad, but it's a mix of the both, that it's like, it was either that or, oh, this is a girl, no one's going to pay attention to this at all. And even though the answer is the same, doesn't matter what tone it comes from. And I don't know, it's just, I'm happy that those days are in the past and we're looking forward into the future. And I think it's going to be much, much, much better, where everybody has an opportunity to, if you put the work in, and this is the career path you're going for, you have a shot to get there. And I think that's becoming more so that way. But
right. I mean, in the US, I totally agree, Mario. Like, it's because we're making noise about this and we're more aware of it, and there's more conversation, that it is definitely looks like it's going to progress. But you are also right that the people who are the scariest are the ones that have that prejudice and they don't acknowledge it. And that's actually something really interesting that I learned recently. The last time I went down to Mexico and talked to one of the founders of the program I worked with, she's a professor at the university there in Monterrey, Mexico. She has a PhD in child psychology, and she's just this amazing woman. And
did I meet her when I was down there? I met her when I was down there that day that we went up and visited the kids.
Probably, yeah. She's this kind of shorter. She's very fair skinned because I think she has.
I have a photo of all four of us standing next to your van.
Yes, awesome. I want that photo. I don't know if I have that photo.
I'll look for it. I'll find it. I know I have it. Oh,
I was going through the photos that you took of us, and I was like, oh, cool. But I didn't see that one. I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's somewhere deep in my computer. But yeah, so Dr. Nadia Vasquez was, if we want to move into the like equity, diversity, inclusivity.
Yeah, well, let's actually, can you talk about Escalante Fronteras, like what you were doing down there? Or that's what it's called, isn't it?
Right. Yes. I'll finish what I was saying about her, because that's a really good way to start off. Escalante Fronteras it was founded by these two people. One, an American climber who had been traveling and studying in Sweden and had worked in Mexico City with drugs and with the UN, and then lived and worked in Argentina. So he had a very worldly outlook on things. And the other one was Dr. Nadia Vasquez, who she was doing her PhD in Mexico, where the program's based, in Monterrey. And she's a professor, and he approached her about this idea of using climbing as a tool for getting kids out of gangs. And that was part of his thesis, where he was studying in Lund, Sweden. So she was like, who is this crazy guy coming out of nowhere who wants to work with gangs and child soldiers, and just wants to start like rock climbing with these kids, because she is not a climber herself. And so she came to this project that they created, this pilot project, with a very like scientific perspective, as a like knowing the human behavior, child psychology, destructive behavior, being familiar with the tools of therapy and knowing therapists, and having a lot of very based common sense. And he came with this, like, let's just do it attitude. Like, he'd go into the neighborhood with his little recorder and talking to these gangsters, essentially. Like, even, like, I remember midnight on, like, New Year's or something, he was in the neighborhood at night, like, in the thick of it, talking to these, like, older teenagers who were on the side of the road, just on the corner,
Did he
doing their thing.
recruit some of, not like recruit, but like, did he get some of the original kids involved in this program?
Right, exactly. So,
question, real quick, just because I remember, was he? And I don't know if this kid is still involved, but Oso.
Yes, exactly. So that Oso, go ahead.
No. You're about to answer my question. Go for it.
Yes. So Oso is an incredible person, and he's one of the people I made the shout out to. So Oso means bear, and that's just his nickname. His full name is Alberto Amado Cordova. I'm pretty sure. They have 4 names usually in Mexico, and basically, so he was one of the first kids that they approached because in their minds, Rory is his name, the guy, American, and Nadia, they wanted to talk to the kids that were most vulnerable, who were just starting to get into gangs. And so Oso was 14, and they went into this neighborhood that they had been pointed out to that as a smaller, pretty much like dangerous neighborhood, very impoverished, and saw Oso on the, like, with his little backpack selling paint thinner. And his parents, he was there because his dad basically disappeared. His mom died when he was a year old and he was staying with his grandparents. But he had dropped out of school early. He was in a neighborhood where, if you're not in school, you're hanging out on the street. You're hanging out with the people selling drugs and just trying to get by themselves. They're your friends because there's nobody else to go to. And you're not going to leave your neighborhood because, it could be dangerous, or, it's the other side of the, if you go just a little bit outside your neighborhood, there's like a nice neighborhood and you don't belong there, or you feel like you don't. So Oso was like selling paint thinner, which is the cheapest thing you can get. It's just a couple of pesos and you get like they have this Coke bottle and they'll get this napkin wet, or like you'll have your napkin with you and you just get a little bit wet, and then you huff it and you get high for a couple of minutes. And the nature of the chemical is that it basically kills your brain cells. It's just, you're just huffing like straight this horrible chemical. But that was the cheapest, most accessible thing because everybody in that neighborhood and their cousin worked in construction in non-skilled labor. So Oso's there, he's got his backpack, and he's just like slinging paint thinner to get by. And they're able to talk to him. And I don't know like the story, like all the details, but essentially they were like, yo, if you're sober, we can take you climbing. And that's what happened for like the first 6 months of the pilot project. They would go in and talk to Oso and his friends or his cousins and be like, okay, hey, like if you stay sober, if you're clear-minded, we'll take you out to your local area, La Huasteca. And
which is beautiful, by the way.
It's amazing. Yeah. So this area is like right next to the city. Like you're in the city, you go through this gate around this big rock fin, and boom, you're in this canyon with this epic 400-meter, like 900,000 foot wall in front of you.
Yeah. So like to put perspective on that for like, because we're here in DFW and most people in Dallas are listening to this podcast. So imagine going from downtown to Plano and then having 2,000 foot walls, like just to climb around, sport climb. And is this like trad and sport, or is this kind of like adventure? It's a little bit of everything.
It's definitely adventure climbing. Yeah, it's hard limestone. So it's technically you don't want to do a lot of trad, but given like the way that the old school climbers bolted it 60 years ago, 70 years ago, like they would just kind of do it mixed. Like they would put up a couple bolts where you had to, and then when it got super easy, you just run it out and you've got some trad gear with you and you'll plug it in just to like keep yourself safe. But the majority of it is when you walk in and you just see this massive canyon is just sport climbing. So it's very accessible. There's like everything from like class 4 ridge climbing, which is super sketch, to like 5'9". Yeah, because of the limestone, if you go up a ridge, there's blocks that you can just like throw off the side. And it can be really sharp. It's got this crazy texture where it's like bulletproof, but it looks like rain came down and just made these huge pockets. So the top of the rock can be as sharp as like a tooth or knife. So you can get into adventure climbing if you go anywhere off route, or if you go on any multi-pitch, if it's not sheer, or if you go up like the main face of Independencia, which we've done with the kids. It's like, yeah, you don't touch all the rocks, and it's sport climbing, but adventure climbing. So it's
Nice.
But yeah, it's got like hundreds, probably thousands of routes. It goes on for miles inside the canyon, and it's right there. So it's very accessible to the program.
Yeah.
So that's where, yeah.
That's just where I remember, like, actually, because obviously I do not speak Spanish. I wish I do. I'm doing my best on Duolingo.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, no, I've been like super excited about it. But like, I just remember spending time with Oso, and the little bit that we could communicate back and forth. I just, it was weird in a way, because it was my first time trying to talk to an adolescent with a huge language barrier, and not being an adolescent myself, being an adult. And it was the amount of genuineness in his voice and interest in me in general, and just kind of love for climbing, and then happy that I'm there. And I think that was the one thing that I remember him saying to me, that either you or the director, she translated for me, and he was just super happy that I was actually even there to come down.
Yeah.
And that was just what made me like super psyched. And I just like, he stands out so much. And I'll never forget just sitting in that canyon. We're in your van and you're like out there because you're trying to figure out where everybody is. And him and I are just like sitting in the back of your van. The doors are all open, and it's hot as hell, but we're just like trying to figure out and trying to have this conversation. And it was cool. And he was a real cool kid. And but it was at that moment where I was like, I don't want to be in this situation again and not be able to at least hear his thoughts and hear what's going on with him. Like, screw my story. I want to know what I want to know more about him. And
in fact, yeah, actually, we had Sasha Turntine just asked actually if she could do a piece on him for Alpinist. She was just kicking it around, but I realized that like Oso's story we have in Spanish, and we've translated like the basic to English, but his story is super interesting, and I want to hear that as well. And I really hope Alpinist chooses to go forward with that piece.
I have an idea, but we'll talk about it after the show. Oh my God.
Right,
I want to do something. Okay. It just popped
so many
in my
ideas,
head.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the things. Oh,
all the things. So you were one of those people who went down and you experienced this, that these kids were, there's a huge language barrier. Even if you knew Spanish, they came from the lowest class in the city, from an area where like very common with slums, their language, it evolves to be its own. And so you almost create its own dialect. And that happens in like Rio de Janeiro too, where like they create their own dialect so that the cops don't understand them. And then so they've got their own code. But so like Oso, when you're trying to talk to him, he just knows like 500 words in his vocabulary, as opposed to like an educated person like Nadia, the founders, having like a couple thousand, like 15,000 words. And he's saying like, la chingada, güey, eres una pendejada, like with these insults too, but he means them very endearingly. And it's so hard to understand. But what I learned from them was that they communicated so well with like their expressions and their gestures and their enthusiasm. It's just like that, the whole human connection you get around that, what they're saying. So I could actually I had to really connect with them and understand them through like the connection and less through the speaking. Because so like you, actually, I was just like you. I went down in 2014 in March, and I did not know Spanish that well. And I ended up spending 4 months with them not understanding almost anything of what they were saying. Like, and they were psyched to go climbing. They were psyched that I was there. But we would be driving in that van, Wally, the one you talked about, and which was like this vehicle for us, this vessel for us to go like from one world to another. And we'd be trying to drive somewhere to a climbing gym, and we get lost. And they're trying to tell me like, go left, go right, go straight. You know, this, I think it's this way. I had no idea what they're saying. And I would just be like, oh my God, like, how can I connect with these kids? I'm here to help. And like, I could bring gear. Awesome. I can like, it was so comical. And they would be saying stuff about me that if I knew if I could go back and listen to what they were saying, I'd be like laughing my ass off, because they were like, oh my God, this gringa, she has no idea. We're lost. We're never going to get there. And I'm just like, okay, they're giving me encouragement. All right, let's go. Yeah. You know, like awesome. That typical ironic, like, yeah, dramatic irony where I'm just enthusiastic and like gung-ho, I'm going to do my thing, but not really connecting on a deeper level. And that didn't happen for like a good 6 months until I could kind of have a conversation with them. And it's still hard to understand them, but I could start to like what we really want, right, is to like to understand what they're saying on that deeper level and be able to respond correctly.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like acknowledge what they're saying and their feelings, and then respond in a way that's meaningful and on that deeper level. I could not do that. I was so lost. And yeah, so over the 3 years that I was there, we had people like you come down, and they were just so stoked. They're like, doesn't matter. You know, we're going to go climbing. We can just kind of figure out what's going on. We just have to like visually see each other, what they're doing with their hands, and kind of pick up that vibe.
So for people listening to this, like how, just real quick, so we can get this out there so they know, like how can someone support or get in touch or like just get involved with this? Like what's the avenue?
Right. So Escalon de Fronteras, its mission is so that people know how to help. Its mission is to empower at-risk youth through climbing and education. And originally we had people coming down like yourself who would bring, you know, a camera and talk about the story and experience it, and then bring that back to your community. And currently what we're doing right now is, this can lead into Climbing Without Borders, my own nonprofit, is what we've been doing is and what I've been doing since the beginning, I'll just throw this in here, is bringing resources to this program, like fundraising for specific campaigns, climbing gear, which can be really expensive and is in fact more expensive when it's imported into countries like Mexico, and also bringing services and research to that program. So what people can do is they can go to the website to kind of get an idea. You can look up escalondofronteras.org or translate the words climbingborders.org. I think you can also type in climbingborders.org. Let me just check that. No. Okay. So you got to write Escalon de Fronteras or just translate Climbing Borders. And you can get an idea of what we do. But then when it comes to bringing us resources, there is a PayPal button. But if people go to Climbing Without Borders, which is my nonprofit, which was named in tribute to working with them originally and now still working with them, we have a campaign up right now because during COVID, Nadia, who is now running everything, she and her husband, in fact, he's been helping her. He's now a director too. They adapted to the needs of this neighborhood they work with. And as they can't be climbing currently, all these families, when they went into the neighborhood, they said, well, we can't work and we live day to day. Like we go out on the street with our corn, our dolls, our, candy, whatever, and we sell that on the street. And they've got the baby wrapped up on their back, and they've got their kids doing the same thing, running around the highway, in the sun, with all the heinous pollution. And they go back and use that money to buy food. And they could not, because COVID, Monterrey, Mexico was kind of in a stay-at-home lockdown phase. People did not want to just, talk to a stranger and get whatever from them out of their car, like from their window, So they started a campaign, and it's on our website, climbingwithoutborders.com, and it's got a video, and it's explaining the situation and has some video of them talking about their situation. And we have the progress of how many people we've helped. So essentially, we're receiving donations of $1 or more to pay for food to feed those families and those individuals that are vulnerable during lockdown, during the time where they can't get the food to survive. So that's one way that people can help. And even just $1 pays for like food for an individual for a day, which is pretty big.
Like $1 feeds one person per day.
Yeah. And the peso's getting really weak. So it's like just like $1 is worth so much more.
Okay.
And then, and so we've got the whole campaign there. We've got like, if they want to learn more about the program, I put the documentary, which is there. It's 18 minutes, and it was made and circulated in major cinemas in Mexico, and then translated for film festivals. And then I've got there, like, you can also follow Escalona Fronteras on Instagram and Facebook, and I have those links there.
Perfect.
Along with their website.
Yeah, we'll share those in the show notes. Cool.
Right. Cool. So, and then that leads into kind of what I'm doing now. So I worked with Escalona Fronteras for 3 years, and then when everything was kind of sustainable, I left to help remotely while I was still like doing my own thing, and established a nonprofit in the US that is a 501c3, and it's super cool. It's like it's basically taking what we were doing for that one program, which was collecting donations, collecting gear, collecting resources and volunteers and everything, and registering it in the US so that we can give tax-deductible receipts, so that we can increase what's coming in. We have like a warehouse in this gear store that we can house all the stuff and sort it. And we primarily work with Escalona Fronteras in learning how to help these programs and creating resources so that we can help other programs just like them. And so on our website, you'll see the first campaign, which is what we have currently going on, and where we've raised $2,000 for, or $2,500 for Escalona Fronteras to feed families.
Nice.
And then, if you scroll down, it'll show our impact from when we first started working with them, bringing in gear and kind of working with other programs. And so I founded this with the help of the community. Like, I could not have done it alone. I'm just like a dirtbag rock climber, and I didn't even speak Spanish when I went down there. I just had to learn everything as I went. And then like a lot of people have volunteered, helped out. Like we had 2 high school students make this thing actually get registered. They're from Carbondale. They came down to help Escalona Fronteras, and I was like, kids, I want to make this in the US. I don't know how to do it. Registration fees are like $250. Let's just try to raise that much money and figure out how to do this. And they did that. They helped me with that. They did a lot of things for
that's
Escalona
awesome.
Fronteras.
Who are they?
Yeah. Blake, Flynn Blake. Oh shoot, I don't want to get his name wrong. And Tasha.
Okay, that's awesome.
They're super cool kids. They're like, I've met the coolest people, like yourself, come down to volunteer with the program. They just had a couple weeks where their senior project for high school was to come help out, and I was like, perfect. I can do the paperwork, and you can come check out, the program. They came down, and we had the coolest program. We sat in one of the cafes in one of the nearby climbing areas, El Salto, which is like world famous limestone.
World class.
Yeah.
It's such a sleeper. I hope. Yeah. So if anybody's listening, don't go to El Salto. It's terrible. Don't climb there. Don't go there. It's just so bad. It's just that place. I'm in love. Like literally, I cannot wait to get back there. The place is beautiful climbing.
Right. I've traveled to a lot of places, and I very seriously considered living there. It's like a limestone paradise of sport climbing.
Absolutely.
It has, it has this roof with big stalactites called Cueva de Cumbia. You didn't get to see.
No,
but it's
I
just
did not.
like
But you
Thailand.
told me about it.
Oh my god. Oh my god. It's like this horizontal roof with massive stalactites that you can't even wrap your arms around.
So like
Anyways.
for people listening, imagine, Reimer's Ranch, but like with real rock climbing walls that are actually tall. And when you go into sex caves, but like just this thing big enough probably to fit a couple houses in. And that's basically what this cave is with tufas. And then the whole mountain range is just like covered with them. I remember when we were there driving up, I'm sitting there looking at all these ranges away, and I'm like, there has to be climbing over there. And you were like, oh, there probably is, but it's too much work to get all the way over there. I'm like, says who? And these walls look amazing. But I agreed with you. I was like, I remember asking you, trying to get information. I was like, how much does it cost to like buy a house here? And just, I mean, I know they'll call me a gringo, but I don't give two shits. I would like to be here. And that place is amazing.
Yeah.
But what is the actual campground that's there? There is a place if people decide to go. Like, there's a place I know that you're supposed to stay, and I don't know that information.
Right. Well, there's a couple of places. It's changed a lot. Like it can be very unstable. That area specifically is really. It was like a rural mountain town before people started moving in there. So if you wanted like papers to a property, they didn't exist. You had to make them. You had to talk to the guy who's trying to sell it, who has two other brothers they shares with, and then you talk to the whole community to make sure they're all on the same page. And it's getting better. Climbers have bought land.
So, like, if I'm going to go there and climb, though, like, is there a particular campground, or you're saying there's like a lot of places that are popped up?
Right. So, well, it's interesting. So now the easiest place to really talk to, like they speak English as well, is RockCamp, which is a campground with like a slack line and lots of space. They might have like 50 people there at once. But really nice bathrooms and showers. And I think they're done with their room that they built. So they rent out a room. And they have a nice kitchen, which I think they've been using to make food. And for a while, they're making really good pizzas. But that's been like the most developed climber central place. And then there's another place as well. But I'm not too sure if it's still there. So basically RockCamp. Like if you look it up on Google, you can find it. And then when you get your Uber taxi, Uber it up to the town and then taxi your way up to this tiny little rural town, you can walk down the road to almost all the way through town. And then you'll see a little sign that's on the right side that says RockCamp.
Oh, nice.
And it's right around the corner. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, apart from that, there are cabins. It's been growing like crazy. There's a bunch of cabins. Like they look like chalets, like log cabins, which is really strange.
I remember that. We passed by them on the way up. I remember seeing that, actually. I was really surprised because it was just like out of nowhere, there's these random log cabins. And it's like, yeah, I remember that being very odd.
Yes, there's a lot of international influence because this is close to this industrial monster city of Monterey. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of international business there from all the mining and minerals and manufacturing. And so you go up and you find like these German looking little or like Spanish influenced or like Swiss influenced like little cabins that are being built really quickly. So yeah, if you did search El Salto and then camping, you'll find a lot of different places. And some of them are really expensive per night. It'll be like $50. And you're like, what the heck? Like this used to be like $5 a couple years ago. But once you get in there, or if you speak Spanish, you can go to different places and say, hey, is there a cheaper option?
So you can haggle a little bit.
Yeah, you can kind of... Yeah, like and then Kika's is also pretty popular as far as renting rooms. It's the store, and the woman who runs it is like the matriarch of the whole place. She's this amazing old woman. Her whole family surrounds her, and the women are all working and controlling everything. It's super cool.
That's
and
awesome.
they've got a couple of rooms. Yeah. And their camping, actually their camping is what I prefer. I was trying to think of it, but I couldn't. Basically, they have their store, and then in the back, they've got like a communal kitchen, and on the side, they have camping. There's not as much space, and it can be a little bit louder at night. Like the locals like.
In my opinion, if you're not camping with earplugs, then you're making a rookie mistake. So that's just me.
Oh yeah. Like New Year's, it's just incredible. Like the Mexicans really love their fireworks and loud noises. And
I think everyone likes fireworks. I think everyone likes things blowing up a little bit. I mean, I do. 4th of July was great. So.
But I mean, you will get like parties that go late into the night, until like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. with, because of a wedding or and they drink. There's a huge drinking problem. So you get there and you might not be able to sleep if you don't have earplugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
For sure.
So I have a quick question. I kind of want to backtrack to like you moving into Colorado. So like this is where you are now currently living.
Yeah.
And so like, what are you, before we got started here, we were talking briefly about like your current adventures and current things that you're doing now. And so I guess like, is it, what inspires you now? Like you came from competition rock climbing, you've done trad, you've done sport, you've done everything right now. So like, is there anything that you kind of have your sights set on that you're trying to either learn or do, or something that you're kind of going for? Because luckily during this pandemic, you are in the one place that every rock climber wishes they were at that is not in Colorado.
So is it all right if I take a quick bathroom break and then I'll think about this?
Hey there, boys and girls. I want to thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to my show. I'm still new at this. I'm learning tips and tricks. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. I want to take a moment to thank my sponsors, Beyond Clothing. These guys outfit me for all my adventures, all my gear. And I'm not just saying this. I think their clothes is amazingly superior and ahead of everyone else. And most importantly, they're a small company, so they actually listen to your own feedback. If you guys get a chance, check them out. Go to beyondclothing.com. If you decide to buy anything, please use the promo code always ready. Once again, that is always ready. Just type that in and you save a little money, and I donate the money to good things. So appreciate you guys, and check out the next episode because we're jumping right back in it.